My latest video was about James Bond, the 25th James Bond film, having another delay, and I moaned incessantly. I moaned for about 10 minutes about the delay, and it really it got me thinking actually about James Bond generally, the state of the franchise, and to avoid repeating myself here, I'm just going to do sort of a discussion thing, and you can leave a comment below if you obviously if you're not interested. Then anyway, so basically, this is a unedited discussion sort of thing, triggering a discussion. Is the James Bond franchise losing relevance? And that will probably be the title, something along that lines. Is James Bond losing relevance? Is James Bond irrelevant? That kind of thing. And I suppose the reason why I want to, talk about it is, again, that this near 5 year delay, the near 5 year gap between Spectre and Bond 25 doesn't speak to me like a franchise that is in is in brilliant health. But then Spectre made, I think, 800 million, which is the second highest grossing Bond film of all time, and the other one is obviously Skyfall. And Spectre, despite its interesting critical response, did do very well at the box office. It only made less than Skyfall, really because Skyfall appealed to the massively important Chinese market. And again, Skyfall is a very good film, and people, if they hear a film is very good, they will go and see it. So I think box office wise, Bond's doing well, but it does make me think, is the Bond franchise losing relevance? There was a time in the Timothy Dalton years where the films weren't doing quite as well financially speaking. I don't have the statistics or anything right in front of me, but generally that is how it was. The statistics just sort of weren't doing as well as you might think, and it's just kind of what happened. So I suppose the James Bond franchise it's a bit of a concern for me, and I think we are definitely missing out on several years worth of possible Bond films because of these delays. And you can argue, can a delays good for franchises? Does it mean it will come back and people will be like, oh, I've missed this, I'm gonna give it a watch. So there is that compelling argument. And again, Bond has never gone more than 6 years without a release. There was the famous 6 year gap between License to Kill in 1989 and GoldenEye in 1995. And GoldenEye is one of the strongest films in the franchise. So it's an interesting, again, what do you think of this whole thing? And my thoughts on it, my thoughts on the whole gap thing is that a Bond film should be every 3 years. Every two, I think, is achievable, but just won't happen. Every 3 years is completely doable, and it means that people don't feel burnt out by Bond films because it's only every three. If it was every two, then fine, fair enough. But every 4 5 years is just really too long a gap. And back to the whole relevance thing. Back to that. I'm not saying James Bond should suddenly adopt a cinematic universe approach. It should be like Marvel. Let's do a film every year. Let's do spin-offs, branch out. Let's have an M spin-off. Let's do a Q spin-off. All that, or Moneypenny spin-off. A Tanner spin-off. Don't do that. I don't think Bond should ever do the cinematic universe approach where it should expand and be like all the other big franchises, because those franchises, the ones that do work because they're not about one character. So Star Wars is a sort of cinematic universe, and it's not. Luke Skywalker isn't in every film. Vader is not in every film. There's no one main character in Star Wars. Marvel, there's no one main character in Marvel, right? Yes, it could be Iron Man, but no, it's not, because he's not in every film, so he's not. Bond is about one man called James Bond. So, there have been times in Bond history where they thought, could we do a spin-off? Die Another Day came out in 2002, and there were sort of plans that obviously never came to fruition, which were the possibility of doing a 2003, maybe 2004 Jinx spin-off. And Jinx obviously was the Bond girl from Die Another Day. And there's never been a Bond spin-off movie. There's been unofficial Bond movies. There's been, Bond movies not made by Eon, but there's never been a Bond spin-off movie before. And I think it's because the producers maybe are aware of it. And Spectre was kind of an attempt to shift the Bond franchise further into that cinematic universe mold. It was connecting all the Craig films together. It was saying Casino Royale was linked to this, was linked to Spectre. All the films, they mentioned all the films. Funnily enough, they barely mentioned Quantum of Solace. They did a little Dominic Green mention, but that was it. Just kind of glossed over that, which was interesting. Basically, just talking about Casino Royale and Skyfall predominantly, and saying they link up to Spectre. There's this little universe; they're all linked together. And one of the reasons why not Skyfall, I love that film. The reason why Spectre grates on me so much is because it was trying to build a cinematic universe, and it blatantly didn't work. I think so many Bond fans and general casual fans of Bond don't like it because it feels like a very unorganic cinematic universe attempt. It kind of takes the magic away from Casino Royale and Skyfall a little bit. I like the fact that those films are quite standalone. Quantum of Solace and Spectre both try to sort of link up with other films. Spectre was much more of an attempt to do a cinematic universe. Quantum of Solace was just sort of a sequel to Casino Royale. But look at Skyfall, look at Casino Royale. They are the standalones of the Craig era, and they are the most successful. They are the best films so far. So if Bond 25 wants to be a big hit, don't go down that whole cinematic universe route because it won't go well. I honestly don't think a cinematic universe would end well for Bond. I think it would be a disaster. I think Spectre, again, it was doing the whole Blofeld was Bond's adopted brother, and I hated that. It's so annoying. I hate it so much, and it's not like they can recast Blofeld and move on. I mean, I suppose they could, but that's always going to be in the canon unless they obviously reboot again, which is entirely possible. But it's so irritating, and there's little things throughout that film where they link it up. Generally, Bond films are standalone. You can dip in and out. You can watch Octopussy one week, and then the next week you can watch Doctor No, and the next week you can watch Live and Let Die, and the next week you can watch The World Is Not Enough. There's no link between the films. They're just fun. Well, it depends on your opinion, but they're action movies which are standalone. I think a big mistake with Spectre was to try and make it some cinematic universe and make it look like it was all planned, because it obviously wasn't all planned at all. It's actually, if you ignore the cinematic universe of Spectre, there's so little to talk about. And I think if Spectre was a big hit and critically acclaimed and made $1 billion at the box office, they either would have made a sequel by now, or if this delay was always going to happen, the next film would have been like, some other connection, and they probably would have, prepared some spin-offs. It would have been completely different. So I think they're definitely going in a different direction with Bond 25 in the sense of a cinematic universe or a kind of linking up of the films. It won't be an official cinematic universe, but I don't think they're going in any. I really don't know. And I mean, we haven't had an official cast list of Bond 25 yet. We've got Daniel Craig, and that's it. Ben Whishaw, who plays Q, recently said he doesn't even know if he'll be back for Bond 25. And obviously, actors always say this, so just to create a bit of suspense. And maybe he genuinely didn't know. I don't know, but actors are known for sort of covering up and doing those sort of things to add a bit more publicity to the whole thing. Is Ben Whishaw going to return for Bond 25? Question mark on a newspaper or on a blog somewhere. So I think they might be moving away from that cinematic universe approach with the next film. But then again, there's a rumour that Madeline Swan is going to be in the film, but Blofeld, played by Christoph Waltz, is definitely not in it. Christoph Waltz has said he's not in it, and I know he could be saying I'm not in it, and he actually is in it, and he's lying, but I do believe he's not actually in the next film. Maybe he'll be used in Bond 26, but I think, when the next Bond comes along, they should not maybe reboot it. I'm not saying that necessarily, but they shouldn't reference the previous films at all. If it's a reboot, obviously no reference is required at all, because it's a reboot, and if it's continuing on and it's just someone playing Bond again, and it's not a reboot outright, just don't reference those previous films much. Do subtle references, a little bit how in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, George Lazenby is clearly established as the same character Sean Connery played. So this is a bit of a ramble video again, but is James Bond losing relevance? I think box office wise it's doing well, but I think this 5-year gap could really damage the franchise. The fact of the matter is, the only time anyone who isn't really, obviously Bond fans constantly talk about Bond because it's their passion, it's their thing, it's one of their favourite things. Of course they're going to talk about it all the time. They'd be talking about it if the franchise was cancelled outright. They'd still talk about the books, all the films that have been made, including the unofficial ones, the video games. There's always something to talk about, even if they just stop making it. But casual fans of Bond, people who aren't that hardcore on the franchise, or people who maybe just have only seen a few and are just, they only talk about Bond when have only talked about Bond 25 when it said it's delayed, or there hasn't been a sense of excitement or discussion bubbling, and I think that's just partly down to the gap we're having at the moment, and also, yes, maybe the franchise is losing relevance. There was this obviously a 10-year gap between Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens. Force Awakens came out in 2015, Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005. And whatever you think of those movies, there was a period where people thought Star Wars was over, and then I think as soon as that trilogy was announced in 2012, there was a bubbling, gradually sort of building up of excitement and anticipation. And with Bond, maybe it's because Bond is kind of always, there's always some stage of production, but I think at the moment there's nothing. No one is thinking, oh, what's going to happen in Bond 25? And if you ask someone, what big films are you looking forward to in 2020? Very few people, I think, would say Bond 25. Now, I'm not saying Bond 25 is going to be terrible or anything like that, but at the moment, as it stands, anticipation levels are low. And even for Bond fans, there's not much excitement. Maybe they were excited when Danny Boyle was announced as the director, and the new director whose name I can't pronounce and I don't want to butcher was announced. Maybe they were excited when he was announced, but now there's another delay recently announced, so I don't think that helps build anticipation. So maybe that will change. Maybe in a few months when we've got the title, when we've got not a trailer for a while. They haven't started filming, but maybe when we have the first trailer or at least a title, maybe anticipation will go up. But I think with Spectre there was excitement, and the film happened, and we all have opinions on that, and then it kind of dissipated and kind of vanished for a bit, and everyone kind of forgot about Spectre. And I think the cinematic landscape is constantly changing with DC and Marvel and Star Wars and whatever else, Jurassic World, all sorts of franchises, and Bond kind of in the sea of new films. Bond, because it's less frequent, kind of people don't talk about it. So that's my general rambling about the whole James Bond. Is it losing relevance vibe? Is it? What do you think? Well, leave a comment below and give me your opinions on, is James Bond losing relevance? Is it a dying franchise? Do the James Bond films need new producers? Is the franchise losing relevance? I don't know how many times I need to ask that question, but anyway, if you like this video and you want to see more of my other videos, then why not subscribe? I also, the other day, made a bit of a James Bond 25 rant, so if you haven't seen that, why not watch it if you wish. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you're still watching, that's quite admirable, well done. And see you later.